Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. I knew the room before I walked into it. The smell of least success. Polished concrete, soft jazz from a speaker you can't see. Cocktails with names that sound like travel destinations. My wife, Leah, loves these parties. She says they're good for the brand, which apparently includes smiling like the night owes you interest. I don't love them, but I go, because marriage is a long accumulation of small compromises, and showing up has always been one of mine. We were 2 steps inside when her boss cut across a cluster of executives. He had that smooth, expensive posture some men develop when they've forgotten what it feels like to stand in line. Leah's hand slid from my arm. She floated ahead with a laugh bright enough to make the room glance over. "Graham," she sang, landing in his orbit. He kissed the air near her cheek. I caught up in time to be introduced. "This is—" She paused, eyes flicking to me with a micro-expression I'd never seen on her face before, calculation. Then the smile sharpened. "My roommate." The men around her chuckled. Graham smirked. "Roommate," he repeated, savoring the word like it was an inside joke he'd earned. "That's efficient." I could have corrected her in a dozen ways, half of them funny, all of them true. Husband. Partner. The man who changed the flat on the freeway at midnight last winter while she read aloud from a weather app and told me I was her hero. But I didn't say any of it. I felt the little click inside, the one you hear when a picture frame settles onto the nail, and realized something had just found its final place. Leah moved on as if she hadn't shaved the vowels off our vows. She poured charm into empty glasses, told stories where she was always a little smarter than the room, and touched people's sleeves just enough to register. Every so often she looked back at me, gauging whether I was keeping up. I smiled the way you smile for a stranger's camera. A server passed with tiny skewers of something grilled and confident. I took one and ate the entire thing in a bite, mostly to buy myself a second. The music folded into chatter. The chatter folded into Leah telling a product director that some people just don't have the temperament for high-velocity environments. The director laughed like a man who wanted to be remembered. I drifted to the balcony for air. The city glowed below like it was trying to impress someone. In the glass door's reflection, I watched Leah lean closer to Graham, hand on his sleeve, head tilted at that exact angle that says, "I'm listening but also letting you see me listening." She saw me looking and fired a smile through the glass. I returned it. She turned back to the circle. The click inside me repeated, louder, like a metronome changing tempo. I stayed long enough for the speeches. Graham toasted our future and thanked the people who make us look inevitable. People clapped at the rhythm of strategy decks. I clapped too, because I am not impolite, even when I'm finished. On the ride home, she was flushed with victory. "I handled that panel," she said, kicking off her heels in the passenger footwell. "Graham said I'm a natural." "He also said you were efficient," I said, voice easy, eyes on the road. She laughed. "Oh, don't be sensitive about the roommate thing. It was a joke. We don't need to be married in every room." "We are married in all of them," I said, drifting my blinker into the next lane. "Not like that," she replied, scrolling her phone. "These people are weird about spouses. It's easier if they think I'm flexible." "Flexible," I repeated, as if trying the word on. She didn't hear. The screen had her attention, small blue lights reflected in her eyes like faraway emergency vehicles. At home, she put the heels by the door, the way she always does, and left her clutch on the kitchen island. "I'm showering," she called, already halfway down the hall. "Can you order noodles?" "Sure," I said, and ordered nothing. While the bathroom hissed and steamed, I opened her clutch and removed the lanyard with her office fob and the key to our shared storage unit. I set them beside my wallet on the table like a little lineup. On a sticky note, I wrote, "Return to owner." It made me laugh quietly, and then it didn't. I went to the bedroom and opened the bottom drawer where our passport wallets live, unzipped both, and took mine. I left hers exactly where it was. I unplugged the charger from her side and coiled it on mine. I took the small cedar box with my birth certificate, the envelope with the car title, the folder with our boring, necessary papers. Ordinary objects suddenly felt like valves you turn in the basement to shut down parts of a building without anyone noticing the lights dim until the exit signs glow brighter than the rest. Leah sang in the shower. She always sings in the shower. She came out wrapped in a towel, damp and gorgeous in a way that had once undone me. "Did you order?" she asked. "I forgot," I said. "I'll start rice." "That's okay," she said, kissing my cheek on autopilot. "I'm not that hungry." I watched her tuck herself into bed with a phone and a face mask, the night's performance already filed under winds. She fell asleep before midnight, her breathing even, one hand under the pillow like a teenager hiding a diary. At 12:14 I started. I moved with the quiet competence you learn from years of building furniture with missing instructions. The suit bags hold more than you think. So do reusable grocery totes. I packed my essentials first. Clothes, laptop, camera, the book I was halfway through. I took my toolbox from the hall closet and the small framed photo of my mother smiling at me from a picnic table long before Leah ever said yes. I left all the things that should not have to choose between us. The couch we argued and made up on, the mugs from our first road trip, the rug her aunt gave us that sheds like a good dog. I stood in the doorway and looked at the room one last time. It was so obviously ours that it hurt to understand how quickly a single sentence had turned it into a set. But something steadier than hurt had taken hold. It told me to keep going. In the kitchen, I placed my key fob on the counter, then took it back and slipped it into my pocket. I would return it after the rest of the plan unfolded. I opened my laptop and logged into the Home Security app. It allows for guest access with sliders and toggles. It also allows you to remove it with a click. I removed Leah's temporary codes from my studio, not because I meant to lock her out, but because I meant to lock me in somewhere else. I emailed the landlord. "We will need to discuss the lease. I'll stop by tomorrow to talk through options." Neutral words, not declarations. I scheduled a pickup for a short-term storage container. I opened our joint credit card portal and initiated separation to individual accounts, a feature we'd discussed once and dismissed as paranoid. I wasn't paranoid, I was precise. At 1:07 I wrote the note. On a plain sheet of printer paper, in block letters my father taught me because cursive smears when you're left-handed, I wrote, "Roommates don't share futures," under it, smaller. "You introduced me to your boss, I introduced you to consequences." It was pettier than I generally allow myself, but I left it anyway. Not for drama, for accuracy. Bean thumped into the kitchen, claws clicking on tile. He looked at the suit bag and sat down like a question mark. "You're coming," I whispered, and he wagged as if that had been his plan the entire time. I clipped on his leash and gathered the last bag. At the door, I paused. Leah slept in the bedroom, face turned toward the wall, the bedside lamp still on, one heel slightly askew by the dresser like a punctuation mark she forgot to erase. I waited to see if I would feel anything that qualified as doubt. It didn't arrive. The line had been drawn in a room I didn't choose by a sentence I didn't deserve. All I had left to decide was how neatly to step over it. I left my wedding band on the windowsill above the sink where the morning light lands first. I hoped the sun would find it before she did. I locked the door behind us and carried bags to the car in 2 trips. The street was emptied of its day. The city breathed the way it only breathes at 2 a.m. Honest, unobserved, humming with the quiet machines that keep everything else looking effortless by daylight. My studio was 6 blocks away over a bakery that started work before dawn. The air smelled like yeast and decision. I set Bean on the couch, dropped the bags, and stood in the middle of the room that had always been mine. I texted Leah one line and scheduled it to send at 7 a.m. Keys are on the counter. My lawyer will contact you about the rest. The next 30 minutes were logistics staged as mercy. I disabled my profile on the smart lock at the apartment, so only her phone and the physical keys could open it. I transferred the utilities into her name. Simple, reversible, but clarifying. I canceled 2 brunch reservations for the weekend, then donated the gift cards her team had given us last Christmas to a mutual aid group in town. I unsubscribed from a mailing list she loved, and I only tolerated, then laughed because the pettiness felt too small to fit the moment, and clicked undo. At 2:11 I wrote a second note and emailed it to the personal account she checks too rarely. A tidy list of what would happen next. Where to find the spare keys, which bills were due, which subscriptions were canceled, which ones she'd need to update. There was no anger in the bullet points, only the kind of calm you hear in a flight attendant's voice when the plane hits turbulence and they remind you the seatbelt light isn't a suggestion. Then I lay on the studio couch with Bean wedged against my knees, stared at the ceiling's hairline cracks, and let the exhaustion find me. I slept harder than I had in months. The morning found her first. My phone vibrated at 7:03, 7:05, 7:06, her calls stacking like plates. I let them roll to voicemail. A text landed, and I watched it fill in like a patient printer. "What is this? Where are you?" "This isn't funny." Another. "Come home now. We need to talk before I leave for work." The last word made me laugh. Work. As if what she'd done to us was something we could reschedule. I sent the only reply I planned to send. "Check the counter." 3 dots danced, stopped, started again. "Grow up. It was a joke. You're overreacting." I typed, "I don't share a life with someone who introduces me as furniture. You wanted a roommate. Now you have an empty room." Bean snored. The bakery ovens below exhaled another warm breath through the vents. My phone rang again. I silenced it and turned it face down. By 8, I had showered, dressed, and made coffee in a chipped mug that didn't have a story attached to it. I forwarded my landlord's reply to my lawyer. I texted my sister, "I'll be laying low for a bit, don't worry, I'm okay." She called immediately and said, "I'm proud of you," without asking for details. People who really know you don't need the transcript. They hear the shape of your breathing. At 9:12, Leah switched strategies. "We can fix this. You embarrassed me last night by being weird. I had to play it off. You know how these circles are. Stop being dramatic and come home." I wrote back, "You didn't protect us. You performed you. I'm no longer part of that act." Then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and walked Bean down the stairs into the morning. Past the racks of cooling bread the bakers slid to the front, past the line of people who hadn't thought about me or Leah or Graham or anyone's fragile hierarchy. The day felt ordinary in a way I took as a blessing. I bought a loaf because it seemed like what a person who had just moved into the next part of his life should do, and the baker handed it to me with a nod, like we were co-conspirators. In something simple and good. When I got back upstairs, I opened my laptop and drafted 3 emails. One to the HR contact at Leah's company, formally requesting that all future communications to me be sent to council. One to the storage facility, moving my share of our things into my unit. One to Graham that said nothing but please remove my contact information from any company list. You already met my roommate. I didn't hit send on the last one. I closed it and let the draft sit. Some jokes aren't funny out loud. By noon, the quiet had thickened into a new kind of home. I didn't miss the house so much as I missed the version of myself who still believed rooms could make promises people couldn't afford to keep. I made a sandwich, tore off a piece of bread for Bean, and wrote a short list on the back of an envelope. Bank, lease, car, insurance, storage. A life is smaller than you think when you write it down. Lighter, too. At 1:30, my lawyer called. "I got your message," she said. "Tell me exactly what happened." She introduced me as her roommate, I said. To her boss, in a room full of people who know we're married. There was a brief quiet on the line. "That tells me everything," she said. "Let's make this clean." We set an appointment for the next morning. I packed a few more things, answered 2 work emails, and watched afternoon slide across the floorboards like a slow tide. When the sun hit the windowsill where I'd left the ring, I pictured it throwing a little bright spear of light across the kitchen. I hoped she saw it. I hoped it hurt exactly enough to be useful. At 5:02, a final text arrived from Leah that sounded like a person knocking on the wrong door. "Who are you trying to impress with this stunt? Come home. We'll talk after I finish my deck." I typed, "Roommates split the rent and share Wi-Fi. Husbands and wives share names. You chose the first. I chose the door." Then I powered the phone down because peace sometimes needs a little help getting in. When the city lit its evening lamps, I stood at the studio window and watched people hurry toward dinners and trains and lives that would not intersect with mine. The hurt rose and fell. The relief stayed. Tomorrow would be paperwork. Today was a note on a counter and an empty house that, for the first time in a long time, felt honest. And that was enough for a beginning. The first messages came before sunrise. My phone buzzed against the nightstand at the studio, dragging me out of shallow sleep. "What is this? Where are you? Stop acting crazy." Another followed. "Come home now. We need to talk before I leave for work." Then, when silence met her words, "Grow up." It was a joke. I stared at the screen, heart steady. I had expected tears, begging. Instead, she defaulted to dismissal, as if calling me dramatic could turn my absence into a performance rather than her reality. I set the phone face down. Bean snored at the foot of the bed, completely uninterested in the digital storm. By 8 o'clock, the tone changed. "Eli, please, we can fix this. You embarrassed me last night by being weird. I had to cover. You know how corporate people are." That word again. Cover. As if marriage was a costume she could swap out depending on the audience. I typed a single reply. "You didn't protect us, you performed you. I won't share a life that can be laughed off in a room full of strangers." 3 dots pulsed, then vanished. She didn't send anything else for an hour. I made coffee, showered, and called my lawyer. She answered on the second ring. "Tell me," she said. She introduced me as her roommate, I said, my voice flat. In front of her boss and a crowd that knew we were married. There was a pause. "That says everything. Do you want mediation or scorched earth?" "Clean," I said. "I don't want spectacle, just separation." "Then start collecting. Bank accounts, lease, utilities. Make a list of joint assets, send me copies of any messages she's sending you." I spent the rest of the morning doing exactly that. I pulled statements from the bank, separated her charges from mine. I contacted the landlord and asked about my rights to vacate without penalty. I initiated the process of moving my direct deposits into a personal account we'd opened years ago but never used. At 10, Leah called again. I let it go to voicemail. She filled 60 seconds with pleading, excuses, and finally anger. "You're throwing away years over a sentence. You're weak. Do you hear me? Weak." I saved the message and filed it into a folder labeled Case. Around noon, my sister called. She'd heard from a mutual friend that Leah was telling people Eli walked out in the middle of the night like a coward. "Want me to say something?" my sister asked. "No," I said. "Let her talk. I have receipts. When people want truth, I'll show them. Until then, silence is enough." She exhaled. "I'm proud of you." The words landed like a hand on my shoulder. That evening, Leah appeared outside the studio. The buzzer sounded 3 times, sharp, impatient. I didn't answer. Through the second-floor window, I saw her craning her neck, eyes red, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Eli!" she shouted up. "Stop hiding. We need to talk." The bakery owner downstairs stepped outside to smoke, gave her a look, and went back in. She noticed me at the window, raised her hands in exasperation. "You're acting insane," she cried. "I was joking. Do you want me to lose my job? Is that what you want?" I opened the window just enough for my voice to carry. "I want a wife, not a publicist." Her face crumpled. She tried again, softer this time. "We can do counseling. We can fix this. Please come home." "I left home," I said. "On purpose." She stood there another minute, then stormed off, heels striking the pavement like punctuation marks. The next day, the texts multiplied. Some were apologies, others threats. "I'll ruin you if you go through with this. You'll regret this when Graham knows you're unstable. We can still make this work. Please don't tell anyone." I forwarded them all to my lawyer. Her reply came quickly. "Save everything. Don't respond more than necessary. You're building a record." Meanwhile, I kept moving. I met with the landlord and explained. He nodded, sympathetic. "You've always paid on time. If she wants to stay, fine, but you're off the lease starting next month." He slid the paperwork across the desk. Relief loosened something tight in my chest. I transferred the car insurance into my name, set up new utilities at the studio, and ordered a P.O. box for mail. Each small step was a brick in a wall between Leah's chaos and my calm. At the same time, her desperation grew. By Friday, she was waiting outside my office building. When I stepped out for lunch, she rushed up, eyes wide. "Eli, please," she whispered, grabbing my sleeve. "Don't do this to me. I was stupid. I panicked at the party. Graham, he makes everything complicated. I didn't want to look weak in front of him." "You looked weak in front of me," I said quietly, pulling free. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. People walking by slowed, sensing tension. I stepped aside and left her standing there, staring at the pavement. That night she sent one final message that week. "If you leave me, you'll regret it forever." I didn't reply. Instead, I sat on the couch with Bean curled against me and thought about the note I'd left on the counter. Roommates don't share futures. The truth of it rang louder each day. Leah had chosen her role at that party. She had rehearsed it in the mirror of ambition, practiced it in her mind, and delivered it with a smile. I had simply chosen to believe her, and now I was choosing to leave her to it. The divorce paperwork was being drafted, my accounts were clean, and my silence was cutting deeper than any argument could. By the end of that second week, Leah's world was wobbling. Friends stopped defending her when they realized how many details didn't line up. Her boss, Graham, grew cautious after whispers reached his office. And Leah? She was left facing a truth she had tried to laugh off in public. I didn't need to ruin her. She had done that herself with a single word: roommate. All I did was believe her. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and paper. I sat at the long oak table with my lawyer beside me, a stack of documents between us like a barrier. Across the room, Leah kept her gaze fixed on her lap, twisting a tissue into shreds. Her lawyer whispered into her ear now and then, but she didn't respond. When the judge called our case, I stood calmly, hands steady. The lawyer outlined our joint assets, the lease, the accounts I'd already separated. Then she slid the stack of texts forward, the ones where Leah begged, threatened, bargained, and finally insulted. The judge leafed through them briefly, sighed, and set them aside. "Divorce granted," he said. With one stamp, the marriage that had survived 8 years ended in less than 8 minutes. Walking out of that courtroom, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. I felt weightless. Like I'd been carrying something invisible for years and had finally put it down. Leah lingered by the steps, looking at me as if waiting for one last opening. "Eli," she whispered, voice raw. "Please. Can't we talk? I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I studied her face, the hollow cheeks, the faded brightness, the desperation. For a moment, I almost saw the woman I married. Almost. Then I remembered her smile as she introduced me as her roommate. "You did mean it," I said softly. "That's the problem." Her eyes filled, but no words followed. I turned and walked away. Life after the divorce was quieter than I expected. I kept the studio above the bakery, the smell of bread greeting me every morning as the ovens fired. Bean adjusted easily, stretching across the couch as if to remind me that loyalty doesn't need speeches. Friends asked questions at first. What really happened? They'd press. I gave the same answer each time: ask her. Eventually, they stopped asking. Silence, once again, spoke louder than any explanation. Leah tried to rewrite the story. She told people I'd overreacted, that it was just a misunderstanding, that I was insecure. But the details never lined up. Too many people had been at that party, had seen the way she laughed, the way Graham smirked. Too many had heard the rumors after. Slowly, her circle shrank. The people who once orbited her charm drifted away. I never had to defend myself. She did the work for me. Months passed. I repainted the studio, swapped the worn couch for one that fit better, planted a row of herbs along the window that thrived in the morning sun. I built a life out of small, deliberate pieces, routines that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. One afternoon, I bumped into her by chance at a cafe near the river. She was alone, nursing a cup of coffee, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. When she saw me, she froze. Then, almost timidly, she stood and approached. "Eli," she said, voice barely audible. "You look good." I nodded. "I am." She swallowed hard, searching my face. "I messed up. I know I can't fix it, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry." I studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Her lips trembled as if she wanted to ask for more, but I stepped past her and left. Outside, the sun reflected on the water, bright and blinding. I didn't look back. The truth was, I didn't hate her. I didn't even pity her. I simply didn't carry her anymore. The night she introduced me as her roommate had been the last time she defined me. From then on, I chose my own definition. Husband, partner, survivor, builder. Whatever I became, it would never again be the punchline of her ambition. And that was the quietest, sharpest revenge of all.